The village lay nestled in a lush valley, surrounded by mountains that had stood for centuries, guardians of the land. Every tree, every stone, and every river whispered the stories of those who had come before. It was said that the ancestors walked through the village, leaving traces of their wisdom in the soil and sky. The people lived in harmony with nature, their lives intertwined with the land. The crops they planted fed their families, and the rivers quenched their thirst. The village was a place where families supported each other, where laughter echoed through the air during communal feasts, and where every elder was a walking archive of history. The elders gathered beneath the great baobab tree, its wide branches stretching like arms to embrace the village. This tree, ancient and wise, was the heart of the village, a place where the past and future met. The elders, their faces lined with the wisdom of many years, spoke in voices like slow thunder, their words carrying the weight of generations. Their eyes, however, held a deep sorrow, for they knew that the winds of change were stirring, and the storm they spoke of would come soon. "Change is coming," Elder Kofi spoke, his voice low and heavy. "The earth trembles beneath us, and the skies whisper of a tragedy that will test the very soul of this village." He paused, looking around at the gathering. "The prophecy has spoken, and the storm will bring more than rain. It will bring sorrow, betrayal, and blood." The villagers listened in silence. The prophecy, handed down from their ancestors, was not to be taken lightly. It spoke of a great tragedy, one that would change the village forever. The elders spoke in riddles, for such prophecies were never clear, but the truth in their words was undeniable. The air was thick with foreboding, and the villagers knew that the storm was not just a metaphor. In the heart of the village, there lived a young girl named Nia. She was the daughter of the village leader, her heart full of hope and dreams. The sun seemed to rise with her laughter, and the wind carried her voice as she played with the younger children in the fields. Nia's spirit was like the morning sun, bright, free, and full of promise. Her bond with her father, the revered leader of the village, was unbreakable. They shared stories under the stars, where he taught her about the wisdom of their people, about honor, justice, and the strength of their ancestors. "My daughter," her father would say, his voice as warm as the fire they sat by, "our people have always been strong, for we are guided by the wisdom of our ancestors. Our duty is to the land, to each other, and to the future. Never forget where you come from, for it will give you strength when the storm comes." Nia listened with wide eyes, her heart filled with both pride and wonder. She admired her father deeply. In his words, she saw the legacy of generations, a legacy that she would one day carry. But little did she know that storm, spoken of by the elders, was already on its way, and it would take everything from her. The night was calm when the storm finally arrived, but not the kind of storm the elders had warned about. This was a storm born of hatred, greed, and betrayal. The village, once alive with song and dance, fell into a heavy silence. In the darkness, a group of villagers led by Kofi, Nia's cousin, moved stealthily through the shadows. Their hearts were filled with jealousy and ambition. Kofi, driven by his thirst for power, had aligned himself with those who sought to bring down Nia's family. He had turned against the very blood that had nurtured him. Under the cover of night, the group descended upon Nia's home, their eyes cold and their hands ready to strike. Her father, strong and proud, was taken unawares. The sound of the blade cutting through the night was the only warning. Nia's father fell, his life taken by the very hands of his own blood. Her mother, who had soothed Nia's fears with gentle words, was taken in the same cruel manner. There was no mercy, only the coldness of betrayal. The village watched, paralyzed by fear. They had seen the signs of discord in Kofi, but no one dared to speak against him. He had promised them power, wealth, and protection, and in their fear, they had turned a blind eye to his treachery. As Nia lay among the ruins of her home, her body bruised, bloodied, and broken, her spirit was consumed by a burning rage. Her family, her life, had been ripped away from her in an instant. She lay in the darkness, the weight of her grief heavy upon her, but even as she lay broken, a fierce determination burned within her heart. She would survive. She would avenge her family. The cries of the village were lost to the wind, carried away like the last breath of a dying storm. But for Nia, this was just the beginning. Her heart, shattered by the loss, was now filled with an unrelenting fire. She would rise, and she would make them pay. The ruins of Nia's village were a graveyard of memories, a place where laughter had once filled the air and where the spirits of ancestors had danced with the living. Now the smoke of burnt homes hung thick in the air, and the earth beneath her feet was cold, as though the land itself mourned the loss. Nia, bloodied and broken, dragged herself through the wreckage. Her once beautiful home, where her father had taught her the wisdom of the land, lay in ruins. With each painful step, her father's voice echoed in her mind. "My daughter, you are the strength of our ancestors. You must rise, even when the earth tries to bury you." She paused for a moment, every inch of her body screaming, in pain. But within her heart, there was a fire that could not be extinguished. The earth was cold, but her spirit burned hot, fueled by anger, grief, and the will to survive. She had been left for dead, but she would not let her family's blood spill in vain. Nia rose to her feet, her muscles trembling under the weight of both her body and her purpose. "I will restore your honor, Father," she whispered, her voice hoarse but steady. Her eyes, though filled with tears, blazed with an unyielding determination. "The storm has come, but I will be the one to stand against it." The land that had once nurtured her family now bore witness to her rebirth, and she vowed to seek justice, no matter the cost. Nia's journey took her far from the village into the depths of the untamed wilderness. The path to the forbidden land was whispered about in stories told around the village fire, a place where only the bravest dared to tread. Legend spoke of a healer who lived there, one whose wisdom and power could heal even the deepest wounds. But the journey would not be easy. Nia walked for days under the scorching sun, each step a battle against the elements. The grasses were tall, and wild beasts roamed the land, their eyes gleaming like embers in the night. The spirits of her ancestors, who had walked with her father, whispered to her in the wind, guiding her path. Yet even their voices, so familiar and comforting, could not shield her from the dangers that lay ahead. As the sun dipped below the horizon one evening, a storm rolled in, dark clouds swirling like the wrath of the gods. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the scent of rain and danger. Nia stumbled, her body weak from hunger and exhaustion. But she pressed on, her mind set on the healer who awaited her in the forbidden land. The storm beat against her like a relentless foe, but Nia's resolve only hardened. "I will not turn back," she whispered to the wind. "I will survive, for the ancestors are with me." Each day, the journey took more from her, but with every challenge, Nia grew stronger. She learned to read the signs of nature, to listen to the rustling of the leaves and the rhythm of the river. Her spirit, once fragile, began to forge itself into something unbreakable. Her ancestors walked beside her, their voices guiding her through the trials, each whisper strengthening her resolve. Deep in the heart of the jungle, Nia found what she had been searching for. There, in the midst of towering trees and thick vines, the spirit of her mother appeared. She was bathed in an ethereal glow, her form as luminous as the full moon on a cloudless night. "Nia." Her mother's voice was soft yet strong, like the song of a river flowing through the night. "My daughter, you have traveled far and endured much. The path ahead will be even harder." Nia fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Mother," she cried, "I am so lost. I seek justice, but the rage within me threatens to consume me. What should I do?" Her mother smiled, a light radiating from her that seemed to calm the storm inside Nia's heart. "Justice is not a weapon, my child," she said, her voice both tender and firm. "It is the wisdom to know when to fight and when to forgive. You must reclaim your power, not through violence, but through the strength of your identity." She held out a small talisman, glowing with an otherworldly light. "This," her mother said, "is the legacy of our people. It will guide you just as the spirits of the ancestors guided me. Wear it close to your heart, and remember, your true strength lies in knowing who you are." Nia took the talisman, feeling its warmth seep into her very soul. "Thank you, Mother. I will carry your wisdom with me." The spirit of her mother faded into the mist, leaving Nia with a newfound understanding. The path to justice was not one of violence, but one of wisdom, patience, and knowing when to strike and when to show mercy. When Nia returned to her village, she found it changed. Her cousin Kofi had risen to power, his ambition and greed now the guiding forces in the village. The villagers, once united in peace, now lived in fear of him. Nia stood at the edge of the village, watching Kofi as he paraded through the center, surrounded by his loyal followers. Kofi's betrayal had shattered everything Nia's father had worked for, and now the village that had once stood in harmony was broken, divided by fear and mistrust. Nia's heart burned with the need for revenge, yet a part of her hesitated. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Justice is not a weapon. She could confront Kofi directly, challenge him for the leadership he had stolen, but she knew that doing so might tear the village apart even more. Instead, Nia chose to observe, to wait for the right moment. She would uncover his treachery, not with bloodshed, but with the wisdom of her ancestors. Her eyes narrowed as she watched Kofi, his eyes gleaming with power. "The time for revenge will come," she whispered, "but not today." The village once, united by shared traditions, was now a place of fear. The people whispered in the shadows, torn between loyalty to Kofi and the memory of Nia's family. The elders, once revered for their wisdom, were paralyzed by the grip of fear that Kofi held over them. In the quiet of the evening, Nia sought the counsel of old Mama Akosua, the village's most trusted elder. Though frail in body, her mind was sharp, and her words were always weighed with deep wisdom. "You have returned," Mama Akosua said, her eyes sharp despite her age. "I feared the storm had taken you." Nia sat before the elder, her heart heavy. "Kofi has taken everything, my family, my home, my future. I seek justice, but I do not know how to find it." Mama Akosua sighed, her gnarled hands resting on the wooden staff she carried. "You seek revenge, my child. But revenge will consume you. The storm you carry inside will break you, just as it did to the one who betrayed you." Nia clenched her fists. "Then what should I do, elder? What path is there?" "The path of justice is the path of wisdom," Mama Akosua said, her voice firm. "Revenge may seem sweet, but it will leave a bitter taste in your mouth. You must choose wisely, for the weight of your choice will shape the future of this village." Nia's mind whirled with the elder's words. Could she truly let go of her desire for vengeance? Or was she destined to be consumed by the fire of anger that burned inside her? The tension in the village grew with each passing day. The villagers spoke in whispers, the divide between those loyal to Kofi and those who still remembered the honor of Nia's family growing wider. Nia stood at the crossroads of her destiny, her heart torn between the demands of the past and the future she wished to create. The spirits of her ancestors seemed to guide her, but the choice, in the end, would be hers. The villagers gathered. In the heart of the village, their faces a mixture of excitement and fear. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the square where Kofi stood, draped in the elaborate robes of a ruler. He stood tall, his eyes scanning the crowd with a smug sense of victory. The air was thick with anticipation. The grand ceremony to honor Kofi as the new leader of the village had begun. The drummers beat their rhythms in the distance, and the Yai's scent of burning incense filled the air. But as Kofi raised his arms to address the crowd, a voice rang out, sharp and clear, "Enough." The villagers turned, startled. There, standing at the edge of the gathering, was Nia. Her clothes were torn, her face smeared with the dust of the long journey, but her eyes burned with a fire that cut through the air like a blade. The crowd hushed, all eyes on her as she stepped forward, her presence demanding attention. "This man does not deserve your honor." Nia's voice was steady, though it trembled with the weight of the truth she was about to speak. "This man, your new ruler, is a traitor. He killed my family. He killed my father." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. The drumming stopped, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Kofi's face, once filled with arrogance, now darkened with anger. He stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. "Lies, Nia. Lies from a woman who has lost everything." Kofi's voice was like thunder, shaking the ground beneath them. "You speak of betrayal, but it is you who are a disgrace to your father's name." "It is the truth." Nia's words rang out with power, her eyes locking with Kofi's. "Your greed has consumed you, Kofi. You have stained the earth with our blood, and now you stand here wearing the crown of lies." She paused, her heart pounding in her chest. But she had come this far. The village needed to know the truth. The bloodshed that night was not just about greed, Kofi. It was the fulfillment of a curse, one that you brought upon us all. "At that boom." "This," the crowd murmured, their confusion mixing with fear. Nia turned to the elders, her voice softening. "It was the elders who spoke of the curse that haunted our family, and now it has come to pass." The air grew heavier, as if the land itself understood the weight of her words. The elders, who had long been silent, exchanged worried glances. Kofi's face had turned pale, and he looked like a man who had just been caught in a lie too great to hide. "No," Kofi's voice broke, but there was no escaping the truth. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly, Kofi." Nia's voice was cold now, hardened by the pain of the past. "Our father's death was not just your doing. It was part of an ancient prophecy, the curse that has been whispered among our people for generations. It was supposed to be broken by a sacrifice, a choice that he could not make." She turned back to the villagers, her gaze sweeping over them as she spoke. "But Kofi, you never knew that, did you? You only saw the power, the wealth, the chance to claim the land that was not yours." The realization seemed to hit the villagers like a wave, and gasps filled the air. They looked from Nia to Kofi, who was now visibly shaking, his bravado cracking. Like fragile clay. "The curse," an elder whispered. "The curse that spoke of this betrayal." As the truth unfolded, Nia could see the division in the crowd. Some still clung to their loyalty to Kofi, their faces filled with disbelief, while others looked toward Nia, their eyes filled with regret. The once united village now stood on the brink of collapse, and Nia's fate hung in the balance. The revelations cut through the hearts of the villagers, but there was more yet to be uncovered. Nia, standing at the center of the chaos, felt her legs tremble beneath her as the full weight of her discovery began to settle in her chest. This was no longer just about her family's death. It was about the fate of the village itself. The elders, reluctant but bound by their knowledge, stepped forward. Old Mama Akosua, the village's wisest elder, raised her voice. "It is true." Her voice trembled as she spoke. The curse was bound to the bloodline of Nia's family. Long ago, her father was meant to make a sacrifice, to give something precious to prevent this very downfall. She paused, and the silence that followed was suffocating. The villagers, stunned into stillness, dared not breathe. But he failed. The elder's voice broke. He chose his family over the village's salvation, and the curse claimed its due. Kofi's greed only hastened its arrival. Nia stood tall as the revelation hit the villagers like a storm. The truth was out, and now they saw the depths of the treachery. Her heart ached for her father, for the life he had chosen, but there was no turning back. The curse had tied her to this moment, and she had no choice but to see it through. Nia stood before Kofi, her gaze unwavering, her hands clenched at her sides, the weight of her father's death, the burden of her family's legacy, and the cries of her ancestors pressing down upon her. This was the moment where her future, the future of the village, and the legacy of her family would all be decided. Kofi stood before her, no longer the confident man who had taken her father's place, but a shadow of his former self. His hands shook, his eyes wild, and he could no longer meet her gaze. Nia felt the pulse of the ancestors within her, their whispers growing louder, guiding her toward the decision that would shape her path. "Do I strike you down, Kofi?" Nia's voice was like thunder, strong and unforgiving. "Do I avenge the blood you spilled, take what is mine by force, and claim my place as the rightful leader? Or do I walk away from this rage, let go of my pain, and find redemption through mercy?" The spirits of her ancestors stood at her side, their power like the sun, burning in her chest. She could feel their presence, urging her to choose wisely. The villagers watched, breathless, as the weight of her decision hung in the air. Her hand hovered, trembling, over the blade she had drawn. Her mind screamed for vengeance, for justice, but her heart, her very soul, cried out for peace. "I will not kill you, Kofi," Nia said softly, though her voice rang with the power of the earth itself. "Not for my father, not for my family, but for the future of this village." She stepped back, the blade falling from her hand, her heart heavy but clear. The air around her shifted, the storm that had raged inside her now calm, the power of forgiveness coursing through her veins. The villagers, once divided, now stood together in silent awe. Nia's decision, born of wisdom, had shattered the cycle of hatred that had threatened to destroy them. As the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the land, Nia took her place as the leader, not through bloodshed, but through strength, wisdom, and the power of forgiveness. The land that had been marked by betrayal was now cleansed by her mercy. And so, the village began to heal. The curse was broken, and Nia, the daughter of a fallen leader, became the one to restore peace and honor to her people. The true test had been passed, not with violence, but with the strength of a heart unbroken. The village had once been broken, torn apart by betrayal, grief, and the poisonous whispers of greed. But as Nia returned to its heart, the winds shifted, and the very land seemed to breathe again. Her eyes, though tired and filled with the shadows of the past, burned with a new strength, a fire tempered not by vengeance, but by wisdom. She walked into the village not as the girl who had lost everything, but as the woman who had learned to rise from the ashes. The villagers, gathered at the center, watched her with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. The air around them was heavy, as if the land itself was waiting for her to speak. Nia stood before them, her posture straight, her hands held out to the sides as though to embrace them all. "I return not to seek vengeance, but to bring peace." Nia's voice, though softer than the roar of the storm that had once raged in her heart, was firm. "We are all children of the same earth, and the ancestors watch over us, hoping we will learn from our past, not repeat it." The village, once divided by fear, now stood at a crossroads. Her words, filled with the weight of all that she had endured, broke the silence. Nia spoke of forgiveness, of healing, and of the need to let go of old wounds in order to move forward. Her voice was a beacon that called them back to the values they had once shared, the traditions of unity, of working together, and of the sacred bond they had with the land and the spirits of their ancestors. "We must rebuild," she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. "But we will not rebuild from the ashes of vengeance. We will rebuild from the strength of our hearts. Our ancestors would not have wanted us to destroy each other. They wanted us to rise together." The people, once torn by suspicion and fear, began to move toward each other. Slowly, the village began to heal. The land that had once been darkened by hatred now seemed to breathe in the light of their unity. As Nia spoke, the villagers rediscovered the spirit of cooperation that had once made their community thrive. Families who had turned away from one another now shared words of peace, and the air, once thick with distrust, lightened. As the days passed, Nia's leadership became the guiding force of the village. She wasn't just a leader in name. She was the embodiment of the strength that the land had always promised, the wisdom of the elders, and the warmth of the sun. With each word she spoke, with each decision she made, the village moved closer to the unity it had lost. The great ceremony to honor the memory of Nia's family and the sacrifices they had made was held beneath the sacred baobab tree, where the spirits of the ancestors were said to reside. It was the same tree where the elders had spoken the prophecy of old, and where now, under Nia's leadership, the village gathered to remember the past and look to the future. The ceremony began as the elders, dressed in their ceremonial garb, approached the tree, chanting in unison. Their voices were like a river flowing through the village, stirring something ancient within the people. The air around them seemed to crackle with power, as if the spirits of the ancestors themselves had descended to witness the healing. Nia stood beside the tree, her heart heavy with the weight of her father's legacy, but her spirit lightened by the knowledge that she was fulfilling his dream, not of vengeance, but of peace. Her eyes were closed for a moment as the songs of her people filled the air, and she felt the presence of her ancestors surround her, their approval like a soft breeze brushing against her face. "We honor you, Father and Mother, and all those who came before us." Nia spoke softly, though her voice carried across the crowd. "You gave us life, you gave us strength, and now we carry your wisdom into the future." The villagers, standing in a circle around the sacred tree, raised their hands to the sky, offering prayers and songs to the spirits. The ceremony was not only an act of remembrance, but a moment of rebirth. In honoring the past, the villagers now had the strength to move forward. The land, once poisoned by betrayal, now felt fertile again, and the village began to heal as they shared stories, offered their own prayers, and acknowledged the lessons of forgiveness. Nia watched as the younger generation listened intently, the lessons of the ancestors being passed on to them. She felt pride swelling in her chest, knowing that her journey had not only restored her family's honor, but had also given her people the chance to rebuild their future. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting its golden light over the village, Nia stood at the edge of the land, looking out toward the horizon. The past was behind her, and though it had shaped her, it no longer weighed her down. The village, once fractured, now stood united. The people had healed, and they had done so not through bloodshed, but through understanding, forgiveness, and the willingness to learn from their mistakes. Nia's leadership, though born from loss, had become the bridge between the old ways and the new. Her journey, filled with pain and sacrifice, had given her the wisdom to guide the people forward, to show them that the true strength of a community was found in unity, not division. "We will move forward together," Nia whispered to herself, her heart light. "For the ancestors, for the future, for the land we walk upon." As the first stars began to appear in the sky, the village, now filled with hope, looked toward a new dawn. Nia had reclaimed her family's legacy, but she had also forged a new path for the younger generation. The future, once uncertain, now felt bright. The lessons of the past would never be forgotten, but now they would guide the village into a new era, one of peace, wisdom, and unity. With a final glance toward the rising sun, Nia stepped forward, ready to lead her people into a future where both tradition and change walked side by side. The village, once broken, was now whole again. The healing had begun, and with it, a new chapter in the village's story had been written.